Welcome back to Every Other Carl. I'm Carl, and today I'm going to be building the floor for my 10x16 shed. In the last video, I showed you how to build this gravel pad. It is 18 feet long by 12 feet wide. That's going to give me a foot of gravel on each side of my 10x16 shed. Go ahead and check that video out. But today I'm going to be focusing on the floor build using 4x4 by 16 foot skids underneath my pressure treated 2x6 floor joists. Let's get to work. These 4x4 skids are a great first layer for your shed floor. If you leave the ends open over gravel, it allows for plenty of airflow that will keep your floor decking dry. They also give you a consistent base for your joists and even allow you to potentially move the shed in the future if necessary. These are pressure-treated, ground contact rated 4x4s. Their actual dimensions are about 3.5 by 3.5. That's important to remember when you're laying them out. When I built my gravel pad, I oversized it by 2 feet in both length and width, making it 12 feet by 18 feet. That means that I have about 1 foot of gravel around all sides of my shed floor. This is essential for drainage. I centered my 16-foot skids on the pad and spaced them 35.25 inches apart. Since the actual widths of these 4x4s is 3.5 by 3.5, this gave me a total width of 10 feet. With the skids generally in place, I started squaring them off and prepping the joists. Alright, so I've started to square off my base, but one thing to note is I need this shed to be exactly 10 feet wide by exactly 16 feet long, and I need to get that right from the beginning. So the wood that you get from Home Depot, you got to double check it. So this is supposed to be 10 feet, but the actual length is 10 feet and 3/4 of an inch. Also, I'm going to have the band board along the edge here, and one on that side, and that adds an additional 1.5 inches of wood on each side. So I need to factor that into my entire 10-foot run. So that would be 3 3/4 of an inch of the material I need to remove from this 10-footer. So I'm measuring in to 3 3/4. And I'm going to cut that off. Like I was saying, I'm installing 16-foot band boards along either side of the floor. With the material I'm cutting off of the joists, the total joist length comes to 117 inches. All my material is pressure treated 2x6. I'm spacing my joists at 15 inches on center in order to have a nice firm floor. With 15-inch on-center 2x6 joists and 3/4 decking, this type of floor would probably be strong enough to hold a lawn tractor or similar sized equipment. Since this is just going to be a studio/workshop space, I probably could have gotten away with using 2x4s instead of 2x6s, but I decided to spend the little bit of extra money to overbuild it and make it nice and firm underfoot. In order to get to the 16 feet in length, I'm installing 13 joists. In order to get the majority of the joist to 15 inches on center, the first 2 on either end are 13 3/4 inches apart. Then the rest can be 14.5 inches apart, making them 15 inches on center. There are a few really good plans available online, some even free, to help you decide how you want to build your shed. I recommend checking out myoutdoorplans.com and buildblueprints.com. Now, if I double check it, end to end, including the rim boards, that is exactly 10 feet. So I'm going to use this joist as a template and cut all my other ones. It's really important to double check your measurements at this point. If you mess up the floor dimensions, you'll be dealing with it for the rest of the shed build. So I have a few pieces of cull wood that I got from Home Depot, 70% off. This was a 2x8. I'm gonna rip this down to be a 2x6, and I got a couple more of those too. If you didn't know, Home Depot and Lowe's sell their cull wood, or scraps and damaged wood, usually near the saw in the lumber area. It's for a substantial discount, usually around 70% off. If you're willing to be patient and do some creative cutting, the cull piles will save you a ton of money. I'd estimate that I got at least 1/3 of my wood for this whole build from the cull piles. Sometimes I go to multiple Home Depots to raid their cull piles to see if there are any pieces I could use. With all my materials ready, I did final measurements, removed a bit of material from the skids, and checked for square. I checked that the skids were level and that the gravel was properly supporting them. Then I installed the band boards and rim joists using 3-inch exterior screws rated for pressure-treated lumber to connect them to the skids. I'll come back later to nail them with galvanized framing nails. Once this step was done, I trimmed the band boards to size and prepared to install the joists. I'm using 3¼ inch galvanized framing nails. These are a bit long for this purpose, but they held everything together really nicely. I did at least 2 nails in either end of the joists and nailed each joist down to the skids. All right, the joists, the band boards, the rim joists, the skids are all in place. Everything is nice and level. Everything is nailed in, galvanized nails, and also supported by some screws. So if I were just building a regular shed, like a tool shed, this is where I would leave it, and I would just put the plywood or OSB on top of this. But I'm gonna be building more of a little studio, so I'm gonna be insulating the floor underneath. But in any case, if you're just building a regular shed, this is where I would leave it. All right, insulation is next. So this is what I'm insulating the floor with. It's not the thickest insulation, but it was on sale and I'm not too worried about it. This is 1 inch of hardboard foam. It also has a radiant heat barrier, this reflective surface. I'm gonna put that face up and I'm gonna cut it so it goes right flush in between the joists. So I made myself this exactly 1 inch guide. So this is gonna be my marker. I'm gonna hold it up against the sides of the joists and put little shelves, little wooden pieces right all along the inside ridges of the joists where that foam can rest flush down onto it. Using some scrap wood, I cut a ton of these little blocks. I could have made full shelves along each joist, but this saved a lot of material. I nailed all of the blocks exactly 1 inch from the top of the joists using my brad nailer. So I put all these little blocks in with 2-inch brads with the Ryobi brad nailer. And now I'm gonna drive them home with these 2.5-inch galvanized finish nails. They're pretty cost effective, that's why I went with them. And just gonna smack one into each one. The brads are already holding it, but I wanna keep them in there nice and tight. All right, all the blocks are nailed in nice and tight. I am ready to try cutting my first piece of insulation. I'm gonna be using my table saw. That's what I'm gonna try first. I think it should do a pretty good job. So double checking my measurements. I'm gonna double check it on each gap. So this one is 13¾ right to the edge there. And I have set up my table saw so that it is cutting 13¾ right to the fence. And I'm gonna run my insulation through. All right, let's see how we did. Got a little bit of a gap here. I'll fill that in with spray foam. And I need a little 2 feet piece right there. But before I do any of that, I'm gonna just keep ripping these 8-foot pieces. And they are slightly different dimensions. My final dimension on each end is 13¾ but the middle ones should be 14½. Pretty close. All right, the larger pieces are in, the 8-foot slices. I filled all the gaps with expansion foam and I started taping some of the seams. So now I'm just gonna finish taping the seams and then go ahead and cut the small pieces. I'm leaving these small gaps here just so I can get in and get to the middle of the joints where I'm gonna tape. So that's the idea. I'm using this poly hanging seaming tape. With the spray foam and seaming tape, this insulation provides a decent vapor barrier under the decking of the shed floor, which is somewhat important since I do plan to heat and air condition the shed in the future. And also remember there's plenty of airflow underneath the joists. All right, most of the seams are all taped. I'm just peeling off the excess spray foam that might inhibit my plywood. I ran out of my seaming tape a little early, but I have some of this foil tape left over from another project. So I'm gonna use this to finish it off. All right, the insulation is in, the joints are taped. Now it's time for plywood. I'm using 3/4 inch OSB subfloor. This stuff is very strong and cost effective. For this 10 by 16 surface, I needed 5 pieces, and I cut them so that all the joints would be staggered. All right, I have everything dry fitted. It's not the original pattern I was gonna go with the plywood, but based on some of my joists being just a hair off, I thought this was better. It was gonna create a more secure platform. So I turned these boards long ways, and I'm gonna attach them with adhesive and then screw them in with 1 5/8 exterior screws. I think I could have gone a little bit longer on the screws, but they're gonna do just fine. Adhesive and screws is absolutely the way to go when installing the floor. This will eliminate squeaking and make the whole structure much more rigid. My screw placement was roughly every 10 inches around the perimeter of the boards and about 3 screws along each joist in the field of each board. All right, that's gonna do it for the shed floor build. Like I said, this is gonna be a bit of a studio space. It's not just a storage shed, so I put that little bit of foam insulation underneath the decking of the floor. That's also gonna help dampen some noise as well as insulate the building. But if you have a comment or question, please leave it in the comments section. Maybe you have an idea of how to do this better and that can help somebody else out. But please like the video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see the next one. The next video is actually going to be starting to work on the gambrel trusses, the trusses that are going to form the barn style roof of this shed. So please subscribe to see that video. Until next time, I'm Everyday Carl, and I'll see you.